Hey, so I'm popping in real quick to make a short video before the Ghost of Yotei launches to talk about what I think might be in the game and what I'm looking forward to experiencing. So, kicking this off, for me, Ghost of Tsushima, I'll mention right out of the gate, was a masterpiece in writing, in music, in gameplay, graphical fidelity while things were in motion. I mean, it was incredible, right? And now I think about it, it was one of the few games where I obtained all of the trophies, and I think I finished all of the multiplayer stuff. So I I didn't expect there to be a sequel. I expected Ghost of Tsushima to be a one and done game. So, like I mentioned, I was incredibly surprised to see Sucker Punch jump back into this world. So, is that the ghost mask? Jin Sakai's ghost mask?
My heart is like racing, dude. There's no way.
It can't be.
You fucking bitches, dude. Oh my god.
I'll start my expectations at the state of play, and I'm going to put these on screen so I can have the bullet points there to follow along with my notes. But one of the things that was mentioned in the state of play that kind of got me thinking was when we saw that kind of flashback with Atsu's family and her standing in front of the mountain. And I was thinking, it reminded me of the show I watched years ago called Samurai Jack. And at the very beginning of the show, one of the things that's shown is that Jack travels around the entire world, I believe, to learn from all these different masters, all these different martial arts styles, in an effort to come back to Japan and try to defeat Aku. And so when I saw that flashback mechanic in the game, I was thinking, I wonder if we might see something like that with Atsu, where in the present day, she is already a master of all these different weapons, right? But in order for us, the player, to kind of understand what her journey is and has been so far, what if every time you learned a new weapon, you experienced a flashback? And it's a little bit different than Tsushima, because with Tsushima, its flashbacks were primarily with Jin Sakai and Lord Shimura, and showing how Jin was kind of changing his values and morals a little bit in an effort to do what was needed to save Tsushima Island as well as the mainland of Japan from the Mongol invasion. But with Atsu, it's going to be a little bit different, since I think the weight of things are going to be shifted from an entire country being invaded to just like your family being slain and you seeking vengeance against them. So, and speaking of the family getting slain, obviously Ghost of Yotei is about the Yotei 6. And one of the things that I'm a little bit curious if the story will explore is more depth than just this vengeance quest, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about expectations regarding other things in the game that have nothing to do with the vengeance, but it could very well be kind of just like, I want to say a typical samurai story, but, a vengeance story in that her family was slain, she goes and trains, she learns all these things, she comes back, and then slays all of them. It's kind of like almost like a typical Assassin's Creed story. You have the board up, you're crossing the names off as you get through the people, right, until you get to the final person. And if that's what the game is, as far as like the main narrative, I'm okay with that. But I'm kind of, cross my fingers that there's a little bit more depth to that, to the story than just that. So, side content. And I was talking about the Yotei 6, comparing it with the Mongol invasion. In Ghost of Tsushima, a big part of the side quests and the people that you interacted with had to do with the Mongols invading, because that was the overarching story. So they took our rice, they killed my husband, they're blocking this road. And I don't say it like it's a negative thing, but obviously that's the story, right? And my guess with what I know about Ghost of Yotei is that this is a very personal story. It's a smaller story in a way. So because the story is a bit smaller and personal with Atsu, it made me think that the characters that you interact with in the world, well, at least I hope and I expect that they're not going to be directly tied to the Yotei 6. So I think it allows the time period of the 1600s in Japan to be explored in a way that isn't directly tied to the main antagonist of the story. So that's going to be something I'm going to be on the lookout for. And something we're kind of seeing in just this video that's playing now is the landscapes, and something that, a lot of gaming has been kind of trending towards, to me, since Breath of the Wild was kind of explore and do anything that you want to do in the game. And in the state of play, the developers talked about that a little bit, that you can kind of just see something in the distance and then go off the beaten path and do what you want to do. And I'm not saying that they're lying, but I think a lot of developers say that this is going to be an open world game, and then it ends up being a little bit less open world. So, you know, I'm hoping that there isn't like a linear path to the game, or that there isn't strictly map markers that the game highly encourages you to follow, which makes things feel very linear. I hope that it is similar to something like Breath of the Wild or Elden Ring, in that you can kind of just look off into the distance, see something that catches your eye, go travel there, and then, you know, you're just playing the game, getting lost for hours. You know, that would be really cool. So obviously the title of the game, Ghost of Yotei, you know, a sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, I was thinking about, and this is very not personal to me per se, but something I would like to see is actually no reference to the Ghost of Tsushima. That'd be like perfect for me personally. But if there is going to be a reference, I think the reference should be subtle. You know, in the state of play again, the developers talked about, I think it's called an onryo, which is like a vengeful spirit that, like, of someone who died that came back to cause harm to either the people that killed the person while they were alive, or even just anybody that's involved or whoever, right? And this is probably a little bit of overthinking on my side, but Jin wasn't referred to as an onryo in the first game, and one, the developers probably didn't think of that when they wrote the story, and then two, I think it's a bit different because, from, like I said, my reading into an onryo, it's a vengeful spirit, right, in Japanese folklore. And my thought was, with Jin, he's an actual person, and so whether it was Khoten Khan, the Mongols, the Shogun, they all knew that Jin, or at least whoever was running around as the ghost, was an actual person. Whereas, you know, it's possible that in Ghost of Yotei, maybe a big part of the narrative is that they don't know who's causing these deaths or who's going around Japan doing this, and so it kind of sparks this, you know, myth of the ghost, or I guess in this case, the onryo. And the other thing that they could do is, since this story is hundreds of years later, they could retroactively change Jin Sakai's character to be an onryo and just flip it and say that's, you know, it's been hundreds of years, that's what people have kind of started to refer to him as, since people kind of forgot who he was. And that's kind of it, I guess. You know, I was thinking, you know, ultimately, I'd like Sucker Punch to implement new ideas for the series, and it sounds like they're doing that, but then also dial up on what worked from the first game. So I can see it even in this video that's playing, that, you know, the wind mechanics, I believe, are still there to kind of subtly guide the player in a particular direction or a place of interest. Look at this, man. The cherry blossoms. This game is going to be fire. I wish I had PS5 Pro. Another mechanic that I think I saw on social media that's going to be in the game is the Ronin showdowns, where I think in Tsushima you had to hunt down the Ronin, and it's going to be, if not Ronin, it'll be something similar where you're kind of doing the one-on-one battle with a swordsman, and that's still going to be there. But then, like I mentioned a bit earlier, with Jin Sakai in the first game changing stances, in this game you're going to be getting different weapons, so that's obviously new. So yeah, you know, despite this list that's on screen right now, I didn't want to go into this game with like high expectations. When I went into Tsushima, it just looked cool, and I was really impressed with this new, you know, IP that was coming out, so I just decided to play it. But now that I have that experience, I'm obviously coming into this one being like, oh, I really hope, you know, these mechanics are still here. So that's all I had to say about Ghost of Yotei and my, you know, expectations. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to have more gaming videos, YouTube shorts, and eventually, at some point, commentary pieces that will be here at some point in my content, you know, pipeline. So that's it for me. Catch you in the next one. Peace.